friends, it's Sarah, and today I'm going to talk about the rest of the books that I read during September. So last video I discussed the 14 books that I read for my core courses in the Magical Readathon, and this video I'm going to talk about the other 14 books that I read, whether they were for the lore side quest, the extra courses, or just completely outside the readathon and just for my own enjoyment. So buckle up, we got 14 more books to talk about. So to start off, I'm going to cover the extra courses that I read for. So for the Q level of Animal Studies, I read House in the Sky by Amanda Lindhout and Sara Corbett. This is an astounding memoir about a self-taught freelance journalist slash traveler who gets kidnapped in Somalia and held for 460 days. It is absolutely devastating and horrific, the things that she goes through in this book. At the beginning, she was pretty reckless and naive, and I found it a little bit hard to relate to her, but as the story went on, obviously, you really feel bad for her. She's going through, to put it incredibly mildly, a rough time. This was a very heavy read. I thought pretty well written. I did really end up feeling for her by the end of the book, and I gave this one 4 stars. It was a lot. It was a lot. Okay, then for Animal Studies D level, I read The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin. This one, again, a little bit of a letdown. It's about a grumpy, like, mid-30s bookstore owner and widower who ends up taking care of a young girl. I think that's maybe a little bit of a spoiler. And then it's kind of like his life and her life as they like grow up. There's a woman who works in publishing who like sells books to bookstores, and like they sort of develop a relationship as well. And it's like heartwarming, but I feel like I've read similar books before. It doesn't feel new or like different from other books like this that I've read. I also felt like the character development wasn't really deep enough for me to really fall in love with these characters. It takes place over like quite a wide breadth of time, and I think that I personally sometimes struggle with that in a book, that I find I like the maybe more like detailed, shorter time span, but like really like in-depth look at people's day-to-day lives to get to know them versus going over the course of, I don't know, I feel like it's a decade or something. Yeah, it like, because it's the storied life, so like it goes through his whole life. So like that's several decades in just one book. And I don't think that type of storytelling helps me connect to characters very well. So I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't bad, it just felt like nothing new. Then for Conjuration, the O level, I read The Art Thief by Michael Finkel. This was a very interesting account of an art thief who stole millions of dollars worth of art purely because he liked the aesthetic of the art and wanted to own it and was like, no one will appreciate it like I do, so I have to have it in my hands and in my home. He never sold any of his art, and his girlfriend helped him carry out more than 200 heists in almost 8 years. It was a really fascinating look at a very odd character, and then also like had some nice background about other art theft as well, and kind of like, you know, museums and all that sort of good stuff. So I found that quite interesting, and I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a very neat little book. For Demonology, the Q level, I read Rules for Ghosting by Shelly J. Shore. This I actually picked up while I was on vacation, and it's got some little mementos in there, which is why it's weird and bulky. But this is I'm not sure if it's categorized as fiction or romance. It should be fiction, but there's definitely like a prominent romance in it. Either way, it's an adult book about Ezra, who is a trans man forced to go back to work at his family's funeral home. He's been trying to avoid the place because he can see ghosts, and, you know, there's a lot of ghosts at a funeral home. But things get even more complicated when his mom declares that she is leaving his father to run away with the rabbi's wife, and Ezra starts crushing on his downstairs neighbor, who is also the rabbi's son, as well as the funeral home volunteer and the husband of a ghost who has started breaking all of the rules for ghosting as Ezra knew them. This is a book that touches on grief and friendship, love, forgiveness, family, legacy, and I just thought it was very emotional, very deep. I really liked the romance in it. I thought that was very lovely too. And I also really liked all the funeral home stuff because they are a Jewish family, and they talk about the different Jewish funeral rites that they provide for families, and it's kind of like the thing that sets them apart from other funeral homes, and that was also just very interesting. This is very lovely. This is very beautiful. I picked it up on a whim because I thought it sounded a little funny. It's not quite as funny as I thought it was going to be, but it was just like very heartfelt and lovely, and I loved all the characters, so I would highly recommend this one. I feel like it may even be like 4.5 stars. It's really good. Another one actually that's good for this time of year, like Halloween vibes. Good time. All right, then for the O level of Artificery, I read A Cat from Our World and the Forgotten Witch, Volume 1 by Hiro Kashiwaba. This is a manga about an elderly witch who accidentally summons a giant cat from our universe instead of a demon, and cute fancy shenanigans ensue. I don't want to say too much about the plot, because again, it's like a very small, it's a short little manga book, and there's like a lot of things going on in it that I don't want to spoil for you, but it is very, very cute. And I really enjoyed the, little witch lady who is trying to deal with a cat doing cat things, but being like almost the size of her house. It's very adorable and lots of cute, like cozy fantasy vibes in it too. Then for the Q level of Artificery, I read Yokohama Kaidashi Kikou, Volume 1 by Hitoshi Ashinano. This was a recommendation from a friend, which also kind of let me down, sadly. I'm sorry, Nathaniel. But this is like a cozy slice of life story about an android girl who runs a coffee shop in the post-apocalypse world. And I really usually enjoy slice of life stuff, but this just felt like literally nothing happened. She opens her coffee shop, she has one of her two customers, she goes down to the gas station on her scooter, and rinse and repeat. It just felt like it was going nowhere. I don't know what else could possibly be happening in this series. There was like a couple little like glimmers of plot in the distance, but they were taking too long, and I was like, I don't want to continue reading this to find out what's going on. There's also a few instances of like weird, really male gaze kind of things that just absolutely ruined my enjoyment of it. There's her data ports in her tongue, so her and another girl android have to make out to transfer data. There's like this weird woman creature who looks like a young woman out on the pond who is just like naked all the time and only goes near children. I don't know. I don't really understand it, but I did not enjoy that part of it at all. So sadly, this got 3 stars because I did like the art. I did like the cozy slice of life vibes. I did not enjoy the plot or the male gaze weird fetishization of women. Those are all my extra courses. Then for the lore side quest, I actually read, I think, 2 books for it. The first one was Cat and Gamer Volume 3 by Wataru Nadatani, which is the 3rd volume in a series about a gamer girl who kind of accidentally adopts a cat. She kind of looks at the cat's behavior through the lens of video gaming, and also her entire life is just video gaming. Like, she gets off work and it's time to grind through a video game. The cat's really cute. The video game stuff gets a little bit old after a while. It's like a 3.5, 4 stars. Like 4 stars for the cat, 3 stars for the plot, I guess, or like lack thereof. I don't know. I found it a little bit cringy, but the cat's adorable, so all is forgiven. Then I read Mirror in the Sky by Aditi Khorana because I had to read a book with a mirror on it, and I could not find any, but this one has mirror the word in the title, and then also this is like a metaphorical mirror. So I just decided to let it work because I could not get anything else that had a mirror on the cover, which is wild. But this is actually a teen book that I've had for ages and keep almost unhauling. And I think now that I've read it, I will unhaul it because it was fine. It was like 3.5 stars. There's a girl named Tara who is like having a rough time in school, and she's kind of struggling socially. Her friend has left for, I think, a semester abroad sort of thing, and so she's like all alone, and she ends up getting absorbed into the popular group, who are very like Mean Girls coded. And at the same time, the world has discovered that there is another Earth that seems to be like almost exactly the same as ours. It is the Mirror in the Sky. There's just like a couple things here and there that are different. But this sci-fi element, which I thought was going to be the whole plot, is really just a lens used so that characters can explore their sense of identity and think about like the choices they've made and maybe be like, man, what if I had done something differently? So after getting over my disappointment that this was not a teen sci-fi book, I thought it was a very interesting coming of age kind of story. It tried to tackle a few social issues as well, like racism and eating disorders, with varying degrees of success. It was interesting. I don't regret reading it. I'm glad that I held on to it until I could read it, but I am going to get rid of it because I'm never going to reread it. So take that as you will. So the last section is just the other books that I read that I wanted to read just for fun. And those are My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine, or Levine, not sure. But this, again, another disappointment. It's a romance that follows a desperate artist who rents out a room from a strange guy who turns out to be a vampire. And this felt like the author had read The Flat Chair by Beth O'Leary, which is amazing, chef's kiss, and then tried to copy it, but then like added a vampire to be like, it's not plagiarism, which didn't work, sadly, because it had none of the charm of Flatshare. The notes exchanged between the flatmates were nowhere near as cutesy or as charming as in Beth O'Leary's book, and it felt like the relationship went from 0 to 100 really fast. Like the progression of the notes felt so fast, and it didn't work. And like I was like, what's the chemistry? They saw each other in towels one time, and then from there it just exploded. Also, the vampire reveal happened within the first 100 pages. Neither character was very interesting. The vampire elements kind of sucked. No pun intended, but it just, like, for the potential it had to be like a silly, kind of ridiculous vampire book, it did not serve any of that. It was just kind of weird and rushed, and then it tried to have a plot halfway through. And I didn't like that. It should have not had the plot, and it should have taken longer for her to figure out that he was a vampire. None of it made sense, and it was very disappointing. I gave it 3 stars. Because I'm not like, I read it and I'm like, this is fine, I'm not mad about it, but it wasn't great. I wouldn't recommend you read it. Find another vampire book. Then another book that I actually purchased on vacation was By Grand Central Station, I Sat Down and Wept by Elizabeth Smart. I gave this one 4 stars, and if you can see, I don't know if it shows up on camera, but I got a bunch of little tabs in it. But this is actually a fictional account of the author's real affair with the poet George Barker. It's very like poetic and a bit abstract, but I really enjoyed it kind of as a series of like emotional vignettes. And I'm gonna see if I can find a couple things to read to you to show you what I really mean by that. Like this part where she says, parents' imaginations build frameworks out of their own hopes and regrets into which children seldom grow, but instead, contrary as trees, lean sideways out of the architecture, blown by a fatal wind their parents never envisaged. My lover hovers around his murder. I cannot call him. I cannot say, make the final kill, and neither can I say, revive her and stay with her forever, the only alternative. I should also mention the guy she has an affair with, like, he's married, so there's a lot of, you know, like, me or her, he kills, you know, the idea of his wife, or he's broken her heart so he can be with me, and like weird guilt kind of intermingled in this, which is also interesting. Where are we all headed for on the swollen river of my undammed grief? O hurricane, be decisive, terminate in any end, but terminate. So it's just very emotional, very poetic. I think one to really kind of like read slowly, kind of chew over, but like no real plot in it. And you do have to know, like there is a foreword in this edition by Jan Martel, which talks about like her affair with George Barker. So reading that and giving this context is good, because I think if you read this without knowing what it's about, you'd just be like, what the heck is going on? So having that context and that foreword is quite important. Then I read The Silence of the Sea by Yrsa Sigurdardottir. I don't think I'm saying her name right ever, but here we are. This is the first of the Thora Gudmundsdottir series that I've read, and I'm really sad to say I didn't enjoy it as much as the like Frey and Huldar series that I have read previously. I have a whole video about, I'm not sure, I can't remember if it's like one book in that series or like the whole series, but I fell in love with that series and I thought it was amazing. This one did not hit the same for me. It starts out really interesting because this book is about a luxury yacht that shows up at a dock with its crew and passengers missing, and the story takes place in 2 timelines. We have Thora, who is trying to figure out what happened, and then the second timeline is what actually happened on the yacht in the past. And Thora is a lawyer, but seemed to be mostly useless from the way she was just like chasing after paperwork. Like, I don't know why she's a main character. in this series. Like, maybe this is the 6th book in the series, so maybe I'm just missing context, but I'm like, why are we following a lawyer as she's just kind of like trying to chase down paperwork so that the parents of the missing people can get life insurance to take care of their other child that they left behind? I don't know. But the ending was super rushed, and like, I felt like I read it and was like, wait, what happened? How did this all go down? Honestly, Thora didn't need to be in this. I wouldn't have minded if it was just the yacht timeline, because that was suspenseful enough. Like, if it had just started with like the yacht coming up to shore, missing its people, and then you just like, the rest of the book is a flashback to what happened to get to that point, I think I would have enjoyed it maybe more. I just don't think Thora really contributed much in this, sadly. But this was a 3-star read for me. I will also be unhauling it, I believe. I found this in a little free library, which is why I've read the 6th book in this series and not the first one. I will keep reading Yrsa Sigurdardottir's books and trying out her different series, and maybe even trying that series, but like from the beginning. But it didn't hit the same way the other ones did, sadly. I also read There Is a Door in This Darkness by Kristin Cashore. This was actually an arc that I got probably like half a year ago, because this book came out in June. Sorry, publisher, but thank you for the free copy. Kristin Cashore is the author of the Graceling series, which I absolutely adore. So anytime she comes out with something new, I'm like, I'm gonna just try it. But this is a magical realism. It says magic-tinged contemporary YA, which is probably closer to what it is. Set in 2020, the big year. Our main character, Wilhelmina, has lost one of her 3 aunts and is mourning her death amidst the chaos of COVID and the 2020 US election. And she ends up experiencing some weird magical events with one of her peers. I think his name is James. It's been a moment since I read this. And so they're trying to like figure out why they're having these weird experiences together. She's also dealing with like the isolation of lockdown and feeling apart from her friends. It was interesting. I wanted the metaphor of like the door in the darkness to be a little like spread throughout the book more, because it kind of shows up at the end and I was like, okay, so that's what the door is. And I wanted it to be, I think, maybe mentioned in the beginning and kind of like woven throughout the rest of the story. It did have actually a really sweet romance in this. It was very cute. A little sad because it's during COVID, so they can't kiss or anything, and I feel bad for them. But I really liked the relationship that developed in this. I'm not sure if I'm far enough away from 2020 to fully appreciate this. I think Kristin Cashore did a great job of portraying like the isolating feeling of the pandemic, the kind of like panic of the idea of like Trump as president again. Even though I'm Canadian, the thought of a second-term Trump, which is still a feeling that is happening at the moment, is absolutely horrifying. I really felt that traveled through time, and I was like, here we are 4 years later, and we're still all experiencing the panic of what if Trump becomes president again, because the US it's everywhere. You can't escape what's going on there. So I think this would be a good read in like a few decades removed from all the events described within. But I do think that right now it felt a little raw, and like I don't really want to be like thinking really hard about the pandemic and the presidency and all of the stuff that happened in 2020. Those are some of the main themes in this book, and like politics and like the pandemic are brought up almost constantly in this. So yeah, you can't escape it, unfortunately. But I think this will be a good kind of remember what it was like in 2020. If you're ever, if you ever have kids and they're like, it can't have been that bad, I feel like this is something you could give them to be like, this is exactly what it was like, read. But being 4 years out from it, not far enough. Not far enough to be reading that, for me at least. Then I read Himawari House by Harmony Becker. This is a lovely graphic novel that follows Nao, who has returned to Tokyo to reconnect with her heritage. She stays at this like house with 2 other girls from around the world, and they all become fast friends as they navigate this unfamiliar country together and try and learn the language. I really love the art style. I thought it was a really good coming of age story, and the characters were all very sweet and lovely. And it is like a pretty chunky graphic novel, but I would gladly read this if it was twice the length and we got to see like even more of the other characters and like what they've gone through to get here. Like I would read 3 volumes of this from like each of the characters' perspective, to be honest. I gave this 5 stars. I can't remember if I said that already, but I just thought this was really sweet and lovely. Book number 14 in this video on 28th of September is A Cat from Our World and the Forgotten Witch, Volume 2 by Hiro Kashiwaba. 5 stars. Second book in the cozy fantasy manga. It's a little less cozy. There's some more action stuff going on, some more fantasy action, but it expands on the world and the plot, and the cat is still so, so cute. Just love that cat. He's just living his life, not really understanding what's going on, and it's amazing. I love, if you can't tell, I love cats, and I love manga with cats in it. That's my favorite manga subgenre. I don't know. I don't really read a lot of manga, but it's usually manga with cats in it if I do. Those are the 14 books that I read adjacent to my core courses in the Magical Readathon. Check out my previous video if you want to see the other 14 books that I read in September. But thank you so much for joining me in this journey of all these books. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Now go read a book. I've had this book for quite a while and not noticed that. That goes to show you how much my eyes work sometimes. Oh, and Parsnip is here next to me, but no longer attacking my lap. And I own it, so yay for me.